Hello everybody. In this video we are going to see how we can use Jamovi to help us calculate some extra calculations. As good as Jamovi is, and as many options as we have in our descriptives, how we can do like standard deviation, maximum, minimum, even with all of these, there are still values that we might be interested in that Jamovi doesn't natively give us. So we might want to be able to get these from either doing the calculation inside of Jamovi itself, we can do that, or we can also bump over to Excel where we have just a little more maneuverability, a little more flexibility in calculating things by hand. So one of these things that we're interested in is called the coefficient of variation. And it's just very simply the standard deviation divided by the mean. And it helps us understand if our standard deviation is very large or if it is very small. And the standard deviation, we kind of want it small relative to the average that we have. And that's kind of how we can see our coefficient of variation. Inside of Jamovi, there's nothing here that allows us to do that calculation. We can get the standard deviation, we can get the mean, but we really can't see the standard deviation divided by the mean. And maybe that is exactly what I want. Now we have some options. So one option that we can do is we could just copy these data and put them into Excel and do the calculation, right? So we could just do, let's copy this table. Let's come over to Excel. We can create a new sheet. We can paste it in and kind of zoom in. And we can say down here that the coefficient of variation, and we can just say that it is equal to the standard deviation divided by the mean. And we would have our coefficient of variation. If we wanted in percentage form, we could also multiply it by 100, and we would get this 30.5% for our coefficient of variation. So that's one way that we can do it. We can definitely copy our data, our summary statistics from Jamovi, and bring them over to Excel and do the calculation like that. We could also look at our data here that we have. So this is the same data. We could calculate equals the standard deviation, STDEV dot S, the standard deviation of the sample. We click on the first one, do Control Shift down, end your parentheses, and hit enter, and that would give us our standard deviation. If we want the mean, we would do the average. Click on this first one, highlight all the data, go ahead and hit enter, and then our coefficient of variation, I should probably label these. This is the standard deviation, this is our mean, and so our coefficient of variation is just going to be equal to the standard deviation divided by the mean, and we get the same exact answer. Okay. However, we actually don't have to leave Jamovi in order to do calculations by hand. There's some really cool options that we have. The only thing that this isn't available on is if you are doing the calculations in using the cloud version of Jamovi, because it doesn't have the module that we need. The module that we need is called this RJ editor. So if you go to the modules, you go to Jamovi library, the one that we need is this RJ editor, and it's to run our code inside of Jamovi. It doesn't work. It's not there for the cloud-based one, but for any of the desktop ones that you have downloaded, you can totally do this. Otherwise, you will need to take it over to Excel and do your intermediate calculations over there. So here's what we can do. We can go click on this RJ, and we're going to go down to the RJ Editor Plus because it allows us to do some fun things. So I'm just going to go click on RJ Editor Plus, and I'm going to click on this guy right here. So when I am here, I have some options of things that I can do. I'm going to grab this Casper wind speeds, and I'm going to pull it over straight over here. And it gives me some summarization of my data, and data is what it stores our entire data set. So all of these variables are stored in this, in this data set that we label as data. Now, one thing that I like to do is if I go down to this little gear icon, I can click on it, and I don't want it to just show output. I want it to show the code in the output, so it shows me what I'm doing. Also, if you notice here, it only gives us 2 decimal places. We can play around that with another piece of code that's called options digits. And we can change that to typically 7 is enough. And so if we run that, It will give us some more decimal places. If we need more than 7, we can push it out to like 10. And it'll give us some more and more decimal places. You can just play around with it. If you want it smaller, you can go down to like, we'll say like 3. And it will change the number of decimal places that are being shown. So if you need more decimal places, just ask it to give you a few more with this options digits. Okay, so inside of here, we can actually have the RJ editor do some calculations for us. Now we could just copy like the mean over and we could like just paste those numbers in directly, or we can have the RJ editor do some of these calculations for us. I'll show you both. So I could just say that the mean, or like the sample mean, which is X bar. So I'm just going to say X bar is equal to, and then I'm just going to type in this number right here, 15.79890. So 79890, 79890, that's my X bar. My sample standard deviation, the symbol for that is S, and that's just going to be 4.1, oopsies, I'm already making a mistake, 81491. And that would be my standard deviation. So my coefficient of variation is just going to be equal to, now, because I've labeled those as variables, I can just do S divided by X bar. And if I want this output to show it to me, I just type CV again. And if I click run, now I have it. I know what X bar is. I know what S is. I know what the coefficient of variation is. I then ask it for it to show it, and it gave it to me. There's my coefficient of variation. So that's one method that you can do this. Another method that we could do is instead we could have the RJ editor actually do the calculations for us. Instead of having to like do the calculation up here, you just have to know some of the output or some of the functions in order to actually get them. So if we say that X bar is equal to the mean, okay, and now we need to ask it for this variable that we just pushed over here. So I'm going to say Casper. And now notice how it's like it's pulled this up. I'm going to go to this bottom one where it says data $, and then the Casper, and it says it's a variable. So if I double click on that one, it will say, hey, I want the mean from the data set of this variable. Like, great, that's what I want. Let's do the same thing for S, but we're going to just do SD for standard deviation. And then we're going to do, I'll just start off topping again. For Cas, I was just starting off with Casper, and it's like, oh, I can pick this one up again, data $Casper. If you choose this one, it doesn't work. This guy does work. So we're going to double click on this one. And then we can, I'm just going to delete out these guys for a moment. We'll just delete them out. Remember that the answer is about 0.3047. And so if we now run this guy, or we can also ask this to show us our X bar, and we can ask it to show us our S. And if we run this guy, notice how it gives us our S, it gives us our X bar, and it gives us our coefficient of variation. So inside of Jamovi, we have this really great calculator that we can use, where you can use this for lots of things. If you have homework that just gives you the summary statistics, where it just gives you values, you can use this as a calculator. It's a very good calculator, and it will do all of your calculations for you, and you can view them very simply from here. And I'll show you some more along the way of how you can do calculations like this, but this is how you can go in and get other summary statistics, other calculations that maybe Jamovi doesn't do natively. You can come in and do some calculations right inside of here in this really nice calculator equation editor. Okay, so that's how you go ahead and get your coefficient of variation. Good luck on that one.